I want to tell you about a hunger that consumed a civilization. Grendel's claws tear through a Grineer's biomechanical carapace. Flesh and circuitry bulge where a throat should be. Warframe pulses with Grendel's Technocyte claws tear through a Grineer's hunger engineered to devour, not destroy. Flesh and watch how the circuitry bulge where a Grineer throat should be mimic his digestion, only to rot from the inside. The Orokin built this gluttony as a leash, a flaw that would outlast them. What becomes of a weapon whose hunger cannot be sated? Written in there what circuitry decay pulses. What if the Grineer's greatest weapon wasn't their claws but the warframe they stole to survive? Grendel's hunger was no accident. The Orokin forged it as a cage, a ravenous algorithm to bind him to their will, a masterstroke of tyranny. Each bite he took fractured his purpose, turning sustenance into sabotage. His exile wasn't failure, it was design. The Grineer who inherited his code carried that same poison, a slow-acting rot masquerading as loyalty. Clone after clone, generation after generation, their degradation became ascension. The Orokin built a legion that would outlive them by crumbling from within. What does a species achieve when its soldiers hunger to be free? The answer festers in every Grineer's gut. A warframe's not a tool, it's a wound that never heals. The lab hums steel cold, lights flicker. A human lies bound, veins pulse with intradi poisona sickly luminescence. Orokin scientists watch, their breath fogs in the vacuum, the virus gnaws. Flesh warps, bone cracks, a warframe shell half-forged looms behind the subject. The first decision, to scream or swallow the scream, to fight or become, the Technocyte surges. It is not a cure, it is a chain. The subject's jaw elongates, teeth sharpen, claws erupt. The warframe's frame bleeds into his spine, metal and marrow knit. He sees the Orokin's face calculating, distant as their own fear festers. They built this monster to devour enemies. They did not foresee what he would devour first. A maw opens. Not just for flesh, for power, for the virus itself. The Orokin's design flaw was no accident. They knew the hunger would outpace the hunt. They knew the warframe would turn on its masters. Grendel's first meal was a scientist, then another. The labs became a tomb. The warframe's hunger was a lock, a leash. Ate the more Grendel's first meal was a need-aid. Then another exiled him, the punishment but as protocol. A Grendel leash now. A shadow in the void or a ghost in the Grineer's stolen shell. The Grineer mimic his form, but they lack the hunger. They lack the wound. Their claws are tools, his were a language, a confession. The Orokin did not create a weapon. They birthed a hunger that could not be fed. And when the void's experiments awoke something older in the Technocyte, Grendel did not consume the world. The world consumed him, but the virus remembers, and every warframe carries its whisper. A first decision never truly made, only deferred. The first decision was not his. Ballas wove the Entradi's threads into Grendel's code, binding Technocytes to a hunger that could not be sated, a cage of biology, not steel. The Orokin knew desperation makes a master more absolute than chains. Each cycle of consumption was a debt. Grendel ate to survive, survived to eat. The virus rewrote his purpose in every cell, every craving. What began as weapon became wardlocked in a loop of need, his will eroded by the very design meant to command him. But the mutation fractured the plan. The Technocytes, once tools of control, turned feral. Grendel's hunger no longer served the Orokin, it devoured itself, flesh rotted, replaced by hollow husks of code and craving. A prisoner in his own body, he became what the Entradi feared, a variable beyond their equations. The Orokin cast him out, let the void take their failed experiment. Let the Grineer scavengers pick clean what they could not, yet Grendel's exile birthed an empire. The Grineer, starved and broken, found purpose in his discarded bones. They stole his warframe not as relic but as salvation. What did they inherit? A curse, not a gift. The same Technocyte hunger that hollowed Grendel now gnaws at their numbers. Each Grineer feeds the machine, unaware they are its next iteration. Ballas flaw perfected by accident, a species bound not by chains but by the illusion of survival. The Zariman consequence was never Grendel's claws. It was the warframe itself, a hunger without end, wearing new flesh. Who in the end is the slave? The question hangs unanswered as the virus whispers still. They gave him hunger not as a flaw, a lock. The Grineer dragged Grendel from the Orokin vaults, his throat a void, their own flesh peeling like rot. They thought they could starve him into obedience. They thought they could fill him with enemies. They did not think the Warframe would eat back. The virus in his veins was never meant to satiate, was a leash. The Orokin knew. Every bite Grendel took gnawed at the Grineer who wielded him. A hunger mirrored a debt paid in flesh. The first queen to mount his frame screamed as her clones withered, her mind spilling into his maw. Others followed. Their desperation sharpened the Warframe's teeth. He devoured soldiers. He devoured Warframes. He devoured the Grineer who tried to bind him. The more they fed him, the less of them remained. A cycle. The Orokin's final cruelty, a weapon that unmade its masters. Grendel's gluttony was no accident. It was a cipher. The queens in their final act clawed at his code, seeking refuge in Tenno bones, but the Warframe's hunger had no off switch. It consumed their ghosts too. Now the Grineer scavenge what's left of their own kind, knowing the truth, knowing they are both host and meal. Knowing the Warframe they stole to cheat death is the same Warframe that turns their flesh to ash. The Orokin built a god who eats. The Grineer built a prison with no walls. What remains is a question the virus will not answer. What remains is a Warframe who has never been hungry enough. To understand what happens next, confront the price they paid. The Orokin bound Grendel with a leash of endless wanting. Ballas slew the seven, snapped that leash. Exile birthed the Grineer. Their stolen Warframe became survival. But hunger unbound is ruin. An empire fell, a virus forgot, a world was devoured. They called it a symbiosis, a pact, but Grendel's hunger does not discriminate, it devours, it forgets. The queen's flesh merged with his biomechanics, a grotesque marriage of will and rot. Their minds, fractured by war within, now flicker in failing circuits. Each attempt to command him gnaws at their already hollow forms. The Technocyte plague seeps through their veins, no cure, only borrowed time. Cuva steel buys moments. Void winds stall the end. Grendel was never meant to be contained. The Orokin knew his appetite would outpace his purpose. A weapon designed to consume enemies became the architect of his maker's extinction. When the Grineer stole his frame, they stole a slow poison. Their survival hinges on a corpse. Every war they wage, every world they strip, feeds the very void that will unmake them. The hunger is a cycle. The queen's bodies waste. Grendel's hunger grows. He feasts on their failing flesh, their stolen will, their dying stars. What remains of the Orokin legacy? A virus, a parasite. A people reduced to biomass, their empire a hollow gullet. They called it survival. It was only. The Grineer queens cling to existence like leeches. Their claws dig into Grendel's frame, but his teeth are deeper. The war within never ended. It festers, it shifts. A queen falls, a virus rises, a world is devoured. Again 301 words. Claws tear through stone, not to build, not to defend, to consume. Grendel's first meal was not meat or marrow, it was the Orokin's own arrogance, served cold on a slab of transference. They bound his hunger to a lock, a key they never held. A child-shaped prison, dressed in bone, taught to beg with empty hands and screaming jaws. The Warframe program was no experiment, it was a leash. A monster forged to outlast its masters, its appetite the failsafe that would one day unmake them all. He learned to eat faster than they could think. The Orokin, architects of eternity, starved in the shadow of their own creation. Their cities, once humming with Tenno light, became graveyards of half-digested steel. Grendel did not rebel, he obeyed, his hunger was their command. But when the last Orokin voice fell silent, the Grineer found him waiting, not as a weapon, as a feast. They carved their empire on his teeth, for a time. The Grineer, hollow men in armor, believed they had tamed the beast. They were wrong. Every bullet fired through Grendel's rifle became a splinter in his skull. Every synth meat ration they fed him was a debt he repaid in kind. Their warlords rode him into battle, only to watch their victories rot. His presence turned air to ash, crops withered, flesh failed. The Grineer thrived on decay, yet they did not see the rot had a face. What does a species built on scavenged DNA do when its scavenger grows too large? The war within was never Grendel's war, it was their funeral. As he feasted, they withered, their genetic vaults, once infinite, began to weep. Clones born weak, soldiers that bled sludge. The more they relied on him, the faster their world collapsed. A cycle as old as the Orokin themselves. Now he walks alone, no master, no purpose. Only the echo of a design flaw that outlived its designers. the Grineer's greatest weapon, a mirror. In his maw they saw their own fate swallowed whole, one bite at a time. 337 words. Grendel walks, his armor is a mosaic of bone and rust, a shrine to the dead who now walk with him. The Grineer send him into the worst of their warswear, the air reeks of burnt sinew, and the ground gnaws at boots. He returns slower each time. His claws drip not with enemy blood, but with the ichor of those who wielded him. The Grineer call it victory. They do not see the rot in their own throats. In the war within, their legions surged to crush the corpus. Grendel devoured ships, then sailors. When the tide turned, he devoured his masters. Their withered forms cling to his frame, eyes hollow where their own light once burned. They do not notice, they cannot. The Orokin knew this hunger would outlast its purpose. They built him to consume, then to be consumed. A lock without a key, a debt paid in flesh. His shadow stretches over the war zones now. The Grineer still ride him, though their bodies fail. Their children are born with his teeth in their jaws. They whisper of conquest, but their breath smells of grave mold. Did the Orokin foresee this? A weapon that would not break, but bend its users to their own design. The hunger was never a flaw, it was a sentence. Grendel's roar shakes the ash from the sky, the Grineer cheer. They do not hear the bones in his voice. They do not taste the end on their tongues. Grendel's claws rend what Excalibur's blade cleaves. One sharpens power, the other dissolves it. The Orokin forged both in the same cruciblade where Excalibur became a king's scepter. Grendel became a prisoner's chain. His hunger was no accident, a fail-safe. A loop of consumption without creation. The Technocyte-infected host, bound to Tenno transference, could not rebel, not when every victory gnawed at his own core. The Orokin knew a weapon must starve to obey. Excalibur's user ascended. Grendel's user was erased. Ash from the sky, the Grineer cheer. They do not hear the bones in his voice. They do not taste the end on their tongues. He was never meant to survive, only to outlast. To devour his master's will until nothing remained but a husk they could discard. But the Grineer found him, a corpse with teeth, a relic they did not understand. Masters they will until nothing stripped the remained but a Technocyte, grafted it to their own, Grineer, and found him learn to hunger. Corpse with their teeth rise was not conquest, it was understand salvage. The Orokin's mistake became their scripture. Grendel's gluttony their god. What does it mean to create a thing that unbuilds the world? The Orokin left no answer. Only a question buried in his code. Asterisk is destruction the final form of control. Asterisk Excalibur stands as a monument, Grendel as a wound. The difference between a tool and a curse is who wields it and who is consumed. The Grineer do not need to understand him. They only need to starve as he does, and in that shared hunger find a master they cannot see. Twisted spires of flesh and steel now cradle the Grineer queens. Their forms, once regal, are fused with Grendel's ravenous essentia, grotesque marriage of predator and prey. The Orokin's gambit was never to feed him. It was to let the hunger hollow them both. Now, in their corrupted cores, the queens whisper to the void. Their wills bent not by claws, but by the warframe they stole to survive. A legacy of gnawing, unending want. The era of Grendel's hunger is over. But in every Grineer's hollow eye, his appetite still starves. What other warframes bear scars of the Orokin's lies? The Wraith's twin masks mirror and void hide a truth etched in shadow. A code that bends light, bends time, bends the soul. How many died to test its hunger? How many more will? The Orokin's final betrayal sleeps in every